Good morning.
Good morning.
If you would, open your Bibles to 1 Timothy, or excuse me, 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy. I'm sorry, 1 Timothy 5. 1 Timothy 5. I wrote that down wrong. 1 Timothy 5. 1 Timothy 5. Verse 23. Okay, 1 Timothy 5, verse 23. Okay, drink no longer water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake and thine often infirmities. Okay, so drink no longer water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake and thine often infirmities. All right, so this is going to be the final in the series, unless somebody has something that they want to address specifically on overcoming depression. We're going to be looking at the role of medicine this week. The role of medicine. So just some principles concerning medication. Actually, these are just truths, some kind of understood things. First off, disease and sickness are a part of life. Disease and sickness are a part of life. Again, none of this is going to be very deep or new. But disease and sickness are a part of life. The same as with the seasons, until the Lord return and do something about it. The fact is that because of sin, the role of sin, and our sinfulness, the fact that disease is a natural inherent part now, though not originally intended to be, but it is a natural inherent part of the human condition. So for the amount of time that we're going to be on planet Earth, there's always going to be disease, there's always going to be sickness. So you're going to be bound or afflicted with something at some point. Now there's ways to treat it, or there's ways to deal with it and mitigate that, but we're all going to be diseased or sickened by something or with something at some point in our time. Okay, the Lord can heal you. The Lord can heal you. Go to James. James chapter 5. James 5. Starting at verse 13, it says, Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Okay, let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And in Psalms, if we were to read as well, that God is also able to heal all our diseases. This is kind of understood. Again, these are just regular truths to be understood, is that God is able to heal you. It's not to say that you wouldn't use medicine or that you couldn't use medicine. It's just a fact that God is able to heal you. God has gifted people in the areas of science and medicine with the understanding that, many believers have sought medical help and treatment for illness. Okay, so in other words, it's not wrong to go seek attention for an issue that you would have. Right? So it's not wicked or evil to go have medical attention for something that you may be afflicted with, for something with which you have an issue. And again, there's been many people that have been gifted or have that, I guess, leading or inkling in their life with regard to pursuit as far as being able to help people in the area of their health. And so God has gifted and directed people in that area, or towards that area. So I guess the understanding there would be that you would take advantage of that. It's nothing to, I guess you could say, to avoid or to shun if you have people that can help, that are studied in that area. Okay, some truths about medical treatment with regard to depression now, since this whole series has been about depression, not just sickness in general. Okay, so since it is a mood disorder, medical treatment focuses on brain chemistry. Since it is a mood disorder, medical treatment focuses on brain chemistry. Most sites that you would look up on, even CDC, National Institutes of Health, if you wanted to go like WebMD even, they would consider depression a mood disorder. And what that would entail is that it's an issue of the mind. It's a mental disorder, is how, in essence, they would classify it. So if it's a mental disorder, what you're going to look at is how would you treat that? How would you treat something that's mental? Well, how would you? And you?
Medication.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In particular, medication that affects the mind. Okay, so you want to affect the chemistry of the mind. Most health issues, as far as that are treated, say, well, okay, in the U.S., so if you have, say, liver cancer, cancer in general is typically treated through chemo, but it's not exclusive to that. There's other methods for being able to treat it that have higher success rates. But anyway, so okay, so say they're going to be focusing on, okay, what does the liver do, and how can we specifically affect the liver, right? Or say same thing with the lung or with the heart. They're going to be specifically looking at, okay, how does this piece of machinery operate so that we can affect what it is that's wrong with it. So as with depression, it's classified as a mood disorder, so it's looked at as a mental disorder. So it's like, okay, so the only way you can affect that would be through the chemistry of the brain. So that's how it's usually treated. Okay, and I couldn't really get a definitive, but there are at least, and the reason I say definitive is because there's stuff coming out every year, every other year, with regard to treatments, medicinal treatment, drug treatment. Okay, so there are currently at least 114 drugs one can be prescribed for treatment. And these are, again, they're all, they fall generally into two types, and that has to do with brain chemistry, but SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and then serotonin and non-reupinephrine reuptake inhibitors, SNRIs. And then you also have TCAs, tricyclic antidepressants, and then monoamine oxidase inhibitors. And again, these all have to do with particular chemicals in your brain as far as your brain operates. So what they're doing, in effect, is they're looking at it just like an engineer would, with the exception that they don't really have like a definitive blueprint for how the brain works. So at best what they have is years of research, which since 1950, I would say, or actually just a little bit before, were taken from Nazi experimentation on live human subjects. Okay, so what they did was at least, it's not exclusive to the U.S., but like you saw that some in Russia as well, and then also in Asia, the Japanese would use their POWs for human experiments for whatever they felt they could get and learn from them. And a lot of what we have is modern technology as a result of that. Not just in medicine, but in other areas as well. But anyway, so what they've done is they've tried as best what they can to kind of map the brain as far as how it works. And then what they do is they say, okay, well, it's a game of trial and error in a sense. Well, we see that this works like this, so at best we could try an experiment, see how this will work. So what they'll do is they'll come up with a medication that kind of tries to address their thesis. If it works, fine for some, okay, that's fine. If not, then okay, we'll try again with something else, and they keep on continuing like that. So it's a game of trial and error quite often. And then another interesting fact is there's a 2006 study by the National Institutes of Health that only 30% of individuals treated within their first cycle go into remission. And the idea there is that you actually want to heal somebody when they're treated for depression. Question, what's the goal for treatment? What's the goal? What's most people's goal when they go seek treatment, when they seek medical help?
Sure, healing.
Okay. Which would mean, hey, I want to be able to take this and then boom, feel fine and then move on, right? Medical community doesn't quite look at it that way. So quite often, they view it as, is this going to be a prolonged state? Now it could be for reasons of money. They'd rather keep you sick, kind of like how a lot of these tire shops or mechanic shops work around here, that you take your car in to get fixed, but they don't really want to fix it because they don't really have a whole lot of business. So the way to get more money out of you is that they either quote unquote find something else wrong, or they break your car on purpose so they can try and get you back, or they can at least keep you there for a prolonged amount of time so that they can get more money out of you. So in a sense, kind of upselling. There is some of that. I'm not saying that the whole medical industry is like that, but there is there is that in there.
It exists, sure, but we like to think that doctors or dentists are above that kind of thing. That's
Yeah, no, some of them aren't.
There is medical malpractice, so there's a big incentive to not do that. Whereas in the car industry, there's not.
It's true.
they have a lot more to lose if they
Yeah.
if they ever get investigated or caught.
Right.
Car plays do like that.
They'll lose business. That's all they'll lose.
Most of the time.
Future business.
Like that Firestone you went to.
Yeah. Should have never went back. But by and large, most people, they would just want to get healed. They didn't want to get better. And quite often, most treatments aren't going to do that for you, but there is at least 30%, as far as according to their 2006 study.
Also, if you
That-
have a company that would take out, like completely eliminate a illness, like cure it, then put everyone else out of the business.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big incentive for them to want that. It's just not often attainable.
There, okay, just throwing this out there, some of my study when I was looking through some of this, just researching the subject in general, for some reason it correlated a little bit with cancer. And then so there's a big, can't think of the word, but basically there's the concept that in the cancer industry, as far as here in the U.S., that most doctors don't want to actually cure it. There's too much money in chemotherapy and there's too much money in treatment to be made, than have a lot of alternative methods to go treat it that actually cure it or have had high success rate in remission.
Lateral?
Actually, I don't remember the specific treatment drugs that they would use, but it's a combination of, like, I guess you could say holistic type methods with.
Ken Hovind wrote a lot about this, actually.
Yeah, well, in Mexico, there's a particular treatment center that has a really high success rate.
It is. I mean, it's, I don't know.
But it almost gets kind of thrown out as
I don't
like
agree with
conspiracy
saying
theory.
that doctors don't really want to help people. I mean, some of the, I think most of them do.
Yeah, I agree. Most of them do.
There's a handful of cranks, just like any other business.
Yeah, yeah. But, I guess getting back to this was that, okay, so 30%, according to their study in 2006, was that only 30% of people treated actually go into remission. So in other words, they don't have to go back to being on a medication for life.
So that's not a very good rate then.
Is that like for mental things, or is that across the board for any illness things? Or?
No, that was particularly for depression disorder. Yeah, within the gamut of whatever amount of drugs that they would have had at that time that they were using to treating what would be considered clinical depression.
So that tells you they don't really understand it completely.
No, it's a lot of trial and error. At least that's the conclusion that I've come to as far as the way they go about it. Because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that to me, that seems phenomenally high. That means they
How
were
they
able
support
to, with
people.
a medicine, treat, and on the first round of it, have that many people not have a problem anymore?
Yeah.
You know, considering that a lot of the causes of depression are sin-related, I mean, which they're not going to be able to touch with medicine.
No. What does happen though is your body chemistry does become affected by the treatment. So in effect, you're going to become dependent on that, and probably longer term than one would expect. Okay, another fact, okay, mental mood disorders carry a stigma that most other illnesses don't, and that's, I mean, this is, again, pretty common sense, goes without saying. If you're depressed, a lot of times people, go to the beach or whatever, but if somebody seeks medical treatment for it, I know for a fact, there are certain jobs that you're pretty much almost disqualified for. I know, well, for military you're disqualified for. At least it used to be. I'm not sure anymore. But back in the 90s, if you would have been treated, even for things like ADHD, and you would have taken Ritalin, then they would have said, and that's not really that doesn't fall under the spectrum of depression, obviously, but they had a list of drugs and things like that if you would have been treated with, then you don't qualify. You could be a nutcase, so they don't want to have the risk of somebody either spazzing out or committing suicide, which is a side effect of some of the drugs, suicidal thoughts. Okay, side effects of depression treatment drugs, suicidal thoughts increase in some. Now, I couldn't find anything definitive. It could be just maybe the places where I looked at. There is and that's why I put this statement here, the caveat to that. There's a correlation, but no conclusive evidence found with regard to, you couldn't say that every single depressive treatment drug is going to give you suicidal thoughts, but there is evidence that there are certain ones that do. So of the you have to go basically through each one of the 114 ones that are out there, and plus any other ones coming out. Some, yes.
I was gonna say, like when they talk to us as nurses about drugs, mental health drugs, that they'll say, for the people who are actually in the psych ward, that when you're first giving them the drugs and they start doing better, you really have to watch them because, they might have felt like doing suicide before, but they were so depressed they couldn't do it. But once they start taking the medicine, if they start getting happy, you have to watch them because then they sometimes will actually commit to suicide because their energy levels come up. So sometimes the medicine will bring their energy level up and they'll have more energy and then they will commit suicide. So that's one of the effects of the drugs. So it was already there, but then you have the energy now to do it.
That was something that that's why I couldn't say, okay, it's definitive, because no one, in the stuff I was reading, I couldn't, in other words, a lot of it attributed to the fact that it was already predisposition, like somebody already had suicide, they call it suicidal ideation. So somebody was already thinking about it prior to going on treatment, and so that was already there. So, and you can't really, it's kind of hard to put a percentage on that, like, okay, how many people have suicidal ideation of the ones that come for treatment? You don't really know until you interview them, really, I guess, in a sense, and even then, if they're open with you with regard to that. But that there is a correlation there with regard to that. And then go to 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9. Okay, verse 24. Verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? Okay, so run that ye may obtain. Okay, and every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I not as one that beateth the air. Okay, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Okay, now, this is a little different, but he speaks here of the fact that he purposely disciplines his body to do what he wants it to do so that he won't be standing ashamed before God when he stands before him. So in other words, that when I live my life, I live it not so that it's wasted on earthly things, but rather, so I have an eternal focus, and that's my priority. So I control my body. It does what I tell it to do. So there's an exercise of discipline here. He's later on going to say, and this would be in Romans, where he states that all things are lawful for me, but not all things are expedient, and that he's not going to be overcome by the power of any. And the idea there is there are things for me to be able to go ahead and do that are within, I guess, my quote-unquote liberty as a Christian, but I'm not going to be enslaved. I'm not going to let my body become a slave to, you can name whatever thing, okay? I guess this is what I wanted to get to with regard to, and this lesson's not very long. With any treatment that you would seek, okay, it's easy to become, I guess, a slave to it, you could say. It's one thing if you have an ongoing medical condition that's going to be prolonged. You have a disease or you have a condition that is going to require basically for the rest of your life to accommodate with certain medical treatment. You can't really control that. That's fine. But you have to be a slave to it. Here's what I mean by that. How many people are prescribed pain medication for, any number of things? Well, I mean, there's really no number to kind of put on that, but you can have folks that take that and then abuse it, and we actually see it we see it a lot here in this this area of the country, where they'll take oxycodone and then become, in effect, non-functional because they either take, not as an overdose, but in other words, they take more than sufficient dose for what it is that they're treating, or their body builds a tolerance for it, so they need something a little bit stronger to be able to go ahead and treat what it is that they're treating for the pain. So then they go seek out something else. To a degree that would be legitimate, but the key would be as far as motivation. What motivates a person as far as with regard to, that's just one example. That's what immediately popped in my head, because we see that a lot where, particularly with oxycodone, but there's other pain medication that people use that if a person's not careful, and then what they become in effect is a recreational drug user. So it makes me feel good to a degree, which is in the intent, because it's supposed to get you to be functional, but again, it's not meant for recreational use. It's supposed to be treatment for your condition, and so don't become a slave. Don't become a slave. Don't allow what you're being treated for or the medication that you're using to be something that is your master. You control your body. And again, that doesn't mean that you might be able to get rid of, or that you're going to get rid of that condition, but the fact is, in treating it, you still ultimately are the master of your body. You're still the one that says, hey, I'm the boss here. And then, you discipline yourself as far as in taking your medicine and taking the treatment that you have, so that it doesn't rule you, but rather you rule it, and you rule your body. You don't lose control of your senses, you don't lose control of your mental faculty, you don't lose control or sense of your reasoning ability through that, and open yourself up for all kind of crazy damage as a result. Do you have any questions?
That could be anything. That could be a slave to all kinds of things. It's like that become a slave to images online.
Yeah.
Maybe sports, maybe if it got out of control.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not always bad things, necessarily.
No, that's the thing. He, when Paul was addressing it, I mean, he was just addressing things that were within his liberty. But the thing was, they weren't, as he put it, expedient. They weren't beneficial to his primary purpose or his primary cause. So, if you're trying to live for the Lord, okay, there's going to be things that you're going to have to set aside and say, hey, I can't, if I'm going to be effective in this area or that area. Yeah, but you're right, it's not limited. I'm just using that only because we're speaking of the drug use in particular, but it's not limited
So
to
what should a
just that.
Christian do if he's depressed?
Well,
Is it always? It's not always because of sin. You guys had a little debate about that a couple weeks ago. It's not necessarily because of sin in someone's life.
no, the thing is, it's hard to diagnose and hard to tell whether or not it's physiological or it's strictly mental. If it's physiological, then you're going to need to address it physiologically.
Sometimes it's just a matter of getting right with God. It's
Yeah.
real simple. It's upset about something. You're angry or whatever, and you just realize, well, I just need to get over it. Or,
It could, yeah, it could be just
Sometimes
something
it's
as simple as that.
I mean to say some of it's just a simple thing that you just need to kind of, and sometimes it's not. I'm not really a clinician.
Honestly, neither am I. I personally tend to shy away. I'm just gonna give my personal bias. I personally tend to shy away from medicines. I'm not against medicine, but I don't. I don't want to have to be.
Guinea pig?
What's that?
Guinea pig?
Yeah, I mean, unless it's something that's proven, or that I know it's gonna
Well,
help.
sometimes they'll even pay you to be the guinea. Some places will even pay you to be the guinea pig for some drugs.
Well, you can't really human experiment, at least in this country. But,
It's kind of,
yeah, when it's voluntary, that's different.
Right.
I'm not, but that's really the best way, because most of the time that the drugs are tested,
I
they're
think the
tested out.
balance of this, I mean, you shouldn't become dependent on a drug, but sometimes you need a drug to treat something, like I do. I only have one kidney, so I have to have medication for blood pressure and other things. But, I think there's a balance of that. Some people it's like, oh no, no drugs, period, end of story. And I don't think that's really a smart way either.
No.
Some things have to be treated.
I know, that's why I said if it's physiological, it's physiological. When it's just strictly mental, or I guess you could say psychological, then you would seek alternative. I would say try and seek something holistic or natural that doesn't require it, because when you add something that's going to affect you physiologically, then that's going to alter your chemistry.
So
And that's gonna create a
something
dependence.
homeopathic or quote unquote natural will also affect you and also has side effects. So it's not like it's a either or equation here. When you're looking at a chemical intervention of some sort, natural, homeopathic, otherwise, it all has effects. It all has primary causes, secondary causes, effects. Consider it all.
It's true. That's a good point. I'm just afraid of becoming dependent, where I need this. It's one thing if it's, you're affected in a physiological way where you have to have it. It's a whole other thing where, okay, now you've created a dependency on it. It's like, okay, now I need to purge this out of myself. I'm sorry, did I answer your question or no? Or did you-
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of it gets back to what you taught in the last few weeks, just the basic lies, like nobody cares, and God doesn't care, things like that.
Yeah. There, since it's primarily a mood disorder or mental disorder, then you have to address it from that standpoint. And a lot of that is going to be a sin-related or a sin issue. If you've dealt with everything and there's still something there, that's not to say that, okay, all right, so here's usually how it comes about. Most people are down or they become non-functional because of how they feel. Okay, that's not to dismiss that their feelings aren't legitimate, or what they feel or what they're going through isn't legitimate. That's, okay, you can't argue that. They're feeling this way. It wouldn't be much different, I would think, than, say, someone going through a hot flash when they're on, high blood pressure. So now I have this sensation in my body that regardless of how much water I intake, how I try to cool myself off, I still feel like I'm overheating, like I'm really, really hot. And it's like, what's going on? So what do I do to affect that? You got to look at it. Okay, well, what is it? First off, okay, try and figure out what's causing that to begin with. Try and diagnose specifically if you can, and then go from there as far as to go ahead and seek a treatment. So it's not to dismiss as far as like if somebody's got these feelings that they're going through, that they're experiencing, or even this thinking, but let's first try and address it. Let's try and diagnose, okay, what's triggering that to begin with, and then from there we can address as far as how to go about treating that. It could be a combination of just simply issues they haven't dealt with, or fears that they have, wrong thinking, or it could be physiological, or a combination of the two. And then if you can streamline the diagnosis as far as to address that, then you go ahead, address that appropriately. Again, I'm not anti-medicine, and as we've seen, God had gifted people with regard to medicine. The reason why we read 1 Timothy with regard to what Paul had told them, and it's not the only place in Scripture that you see where medicine was either mentioned or used or even recommended, but it is out there and it is a source of treatment. It can't help. All right. Any other questions or statements? Okay, if not, we're dismissed.